I just started the Jeep for the last time, hopefully with the old motor in it. Let's get this thing in the garage and get it torn apart. In this video series, I plan to show you how to cheap and easily V8 swap a Jeep Cherokee. This is my 2000 Jeep Cherokee, and I've done a lot of stuff to it, and it's lacking a lot in the power department. And recently, I messed up my old 4.0 pretty bad, so I pulled that out of there, and as you guys will see, painted the engine bay and did frame stiffeners on the front. And now we're getting ready to deal with the transmission, and that's what makes this swap so nice and easy. So this is the transmission out of the donor car I bought. Now, I bought a 97 LS 400 Lexus, and that car gave me the 1UZ V8 that I needed and parts of this transmission. So we will be using the stock Jeep Cherokee transmission, and so you will still have your speedometer, you'll still have your stock T-case, all of that. So it's still very strong. Good stuff. And you just take the input shaft and pump out of the, basically it's the same transmission as what's in your Cherokee. It's a Toyota transmission, but this one's called a R1 or R340, I believe. And it's identical to the Jeep Cherokee, except for the car ones are two-wheel drive. But other than that, they're the same thing. So we take the pieces that adapt it to your new V8 engine that you acquired in your LS400. So we take the bell housing, torque converter, which I'll show you later, input shaft, and planetary gear set. And that's how you marry a V8 into your Jeep Cherokee without spending tons of money. So I decided to take a couple minutes and paint the engine bay on the Jeep, just because I found a little bit of rust and stuff, and I just wanted to keep it protected. So we've got the motor in the right garage now. This is the motor out of the Lexus LS400. It is a 1UZ V8. And as you can see, 1UZ. These are a very, very reliable motor from what everything says. And I have just converted it to coil and deleted the distributors and put it on a standalone harness. So you don't actually have to do that, but it just makes it a lot simpler when you're doing the swap. You can use the factory harness and cut it up and delete the transmission side of it and use it in your swap if you want to save some money. But this just simplifies it. It gets rid of a couple sensors and makes it a lot easier for your swap. So I just test fitted this in here, and it does seem to fit, but it's gonna have to sit a couple inches farther forward than the factory without modifying the firewall right here, because this pokes out pretty good. So I'm probably just gonna move the transmission forward instead of modifying the firewall. I would rather do that. So I'm gonna get the headers on here and see what they want to run into and get the motor placed in the Jeep. Well, here's the motor sitting in the Jeep. And I think we'll be able to make these big old headers that came stock on the car work. I think we'll be able to finagle it to miss the steering shaft right in between the two runners. I think it's looking pretty good. Motor's a little high right now. I'd like to get it down a tad bit more, and I think by tucking it in between those runners we'll be there. But it doesn't fit near as bad as I thought for a big old V8. It does look like this crazy oil filter housing that Toyota has on here is gonna work just fine. I was concerned about that as well. The only main problem I think we have right now is the fan clutch, and fan is supposed to go on right here, and that's way too low. It's gonna hit the steering box and stuff. So I might end up doing all electric fans on this, but that's not a big deal. But yeah, looking better than I thought. So I have started pulling apart the R340 Toyota transmission. I got the bell housing off, and then I undid all the pump bolts, and I don't have a good way to grab this. So I put an extension into one of the bolt, or all the bolt holes, and I kind of just gently pried around it while shaking the shaft here. And eventually I got this to pop out. And so now I'm gonna pull this pump out without dropping all this stuff. So I have both of the pumps and planetary sets out. This is the one from my 2000 Jeep Cherokee, and this is the one from the LS 400 car. Now they look very similar, but this one has a smaller planetary set. So this is smaller, and I notice that this shaft is different between the two, slightly. So that's why you can't put the LS400 torque converter onto this pump and planetary set. This is a lot shorter than this one, as you can see. So you do have to change these out. They are a little bit different, but I should be able to just slide this in and slide this into the transmission, and the motor should bolt right up to the Jeep transmission. So that's pretty awesome. Having fun?
Oh, it's good times.
Stripping wiring apart. Oh yeah. Yeah. So on these bell housings, the Jeep one here, this is the Jeep one because it's all full of mud. It has two provisions for to mount your shifter cable. Right here, that's your shifter cable. So the one you see does not have anything here. So as you can see, I ground this down and I made this little bracket that is gonna sit in between the bell housing and the transmission and allow me to bolt my shifter to this still. Now, put it over here. I just used the old bell housing as a template and just ground all this out, welded two nuts in here for the bolts, and then it should sit right here exactly like the other one and allow me to still have my shifter in the same spot. So we're gonna try that. Well, I'm sitting here in the engine bay and we got the new pump and output shaft installed on the trans and the new bell housing. Here you can see my little bracket that I made mounting the shifter cable to the transmission. Works very good. And I'm surprised at how easy that was, if I'm honest. So let's move on to the next thing. Taking the strap bolts off, get the gas tank out for the return line. We got some extension pieces on the manifolds to get it down a little bit farther, so that we can make an exhaust with these in there. I just cut all the little brackets off for mounting the heat shield, the factory heat shields, to get a little more clearance. I had to clearance this with a little bit with a hammer on both sides, just a little bit. Got these welded on. Got my motor mounts painted and in here on both sides. Trans is ready. And we got some 5/16 metal brake line in a 25-foot spool. And we ran that all the way back to the tank as the return line. And then we're just gonna slip some rubber over it and go into the tank. And it should be no big deal. And then for the feed line, we went far down, deleted there's a plastic section of fuel line here, deleted that because it's close to the exhaust. And bring the metal all the way up. And we're gonna put the factory line nut on there and flare it and hook it right to the Lexus fuel line going to the fuel rail, and it should be fine. And then this will obviously slip over that metal line as the return, so it should be no big deal. Get this thing in. Yeah, you didn't do that out here though.
Well, still hurts.
Yep, we got a little bracket, made, and this is gonna tuck the fuel line over onto the firewall and get it away from everything. So getting there. So what do we got going on? We're
Trail ready.
No.
Oh.
But we got the engine in. We have the trans bolted to it. We've done just kind of some temporary wiring here to test fire it.
We still got to figure out how to wire the alternator from this Lexus.
Yeah,
it's got some weird wiring going on.
I think it's an external regulator we need to go get off the car. We got the ECU has its full power and then ignition power, and we're gonna test fire it, right?
Yeah, our controversial thing right now is we're routing the return line back through the deleted evap system, so we're a little cautious to see what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to give her a shot, see what happens. Got our, if you've watched our videos in the past, you know sometimes there's fires when we do this. So we got a couple fire extinguishers on the ready, and we're going to see what happens. So far I hear a fuel pump.
Oh.
I'm hearing a click. Like,
Yeah, when I turn the key, it's not starting it, not triggering the starter.
something's clicking, like the starter's clicking.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Oh, wait.
Is
Is there like neutral safety switch?
Yeah, I hooked it all back up. Okay, so it seems as though the main power to the starter's not hooked up. All right, folks, well, we'll be right back.
All right, so we've been doing some figuring.
Little rewiring and such.
Yeah, we wired the fuel pump to the new harness for the engine because the factory harness wasn't cutting it. So,
well, what would happen is when you turn the key on, the factory harness would call for fuel.
Mm-hmm.
The fuel pump would pressurize till the regulator told it to shut off. But then once the engine started, there was nothing to signal the fuel pump to turn back on in order to feed the engine, so the engine would stall.
Yep.
So,
and our engine harness knows that the engine's running, and so it'll tell the fuel pump to turn back on.
yeah, so a quick bypass on the factory fuel pump circuit, and voila, no new wires run to the back or anything like that. Just had to deal with it in the engine compartment. So here's where we are.
Yeah.
Let's give her a run.
Okay.
That's the fuel pump you can hear.
Yep.
There it is.
This is where we went into the fuel pump. This relay triggers the
Just
fuel pump.
bypass that factory relay with the new computer harness. Should sound pretty good on the rev limiter.
Yeah.
It's gonna be just about right.
$7,000.
I thought I was setting the rev limiter at 10 grand.
Oh yeah, we are. Yeah.
Let's sit at the cam.
All right. Well, the garage is a mess, but we have an exhaust routed and welded up. It really wasn't that bad. The engine is in here and all wired up, right?
You bet.
Do you have any useful tips about anything?
Well, I would say we could call out the fact that we tried putting this fan on the idler pulley of the 1UZ, and
Probably not a good idea.
I feel like it's probably not going to be a long-term strategy for us.
Any wiring things? Not really.
Look, I mean, I think for me, the wiring thing is don't be afraid to take all the stuff apart. Don't be afraid to strip things out and start over and get it clean and neat so that you know everything you've got in this engine compartment, so that if you're on the trail and something does go wrong, you know, you're talking 10-15 minute fix to find something versus dragging it home on a trailer and trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, I guess one thing we could show them is, so your fuel pump, this is how you can send power to your fuel pump. Now this is going to my harness relay, and so it's still on relay, but this is feeding power to the fuel pump in the fuse box that's in the engine bay. Now, in the Cherokee, we wanted to keep our gauges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So
was the big goal.
to keep our gauges, we kept this factory computer, Jeep computer, and we stripped most of the wires out of it, but we kept the factory coolant gauge and just the pigtail and wired it into the computer in its existing spot.
It's in this loom here.
Yeah, it's all loomed up now, sorry guys. But we also took the oil pressure, which is down there. We took the factory sending unit and wired it back to the computer, and we have oil pressure and coolant still.
Yep.
And since we kept the AW4 and the 231, we still have a speedometer reading. So we have every gauge except for tachometer right now. And there's a couple like tach emulators and stuff sold online, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. So I'll probably post another video about that later, but that's how you can keep all your gauges while doing a pretty good swap. Now, we also did an LS swap, you can see on our channel, a few months ago probably.
Yeah, probably.
How does this compare to you think?
I would say, all in all, shoving this Lexus 1UZ in this Jeep has been a lot easier than putting that LS
Into
in
a Colorado, a Chevy. Yeah,
and what's
so
even more crazy is keeping our factory gauges in this was a very simple task, and we have still not actually conquered keeping factory gauges in that Colorado.
not
So
quite
we're
yet.
still running
A scan gauge. Some sort
an
of
ODB2
Yeah.
emulator to get our gauges in that, because that's a newer truck. It's got the body control module, and everything just gets infinitely harder.
Yeah.
And we don't like to go buy really expensive wiring harnesses and things like that to do simple stuff like that.
No.
So
No, and so I don't know. Another thing I can think of right now is when you guys tear into your steering column because you're trying to get a ignition wire for your harness. If you go in here, undo this plug on the steering column. If you undo this little one and this big one, this blue wire, this little blue wire is your ignition source, and it will always be on with the ignition. Some of these turn off while cranking, and so then that's no good. You're not going to start your motor, but that's the one you need. So it's figuring out those little things that make all the difference. So yeah, hope that helps. So outside of the garage with the Jeep, got most things somewhat buttoned up. There's still a bit of refining to do. Like this battery needs a permanent location and stuff like that, but got it enough where it'll run. And all I'm waiting on is a new throttle cable. It turns out that the stock car LS400 throttle cable works perfectly, but mine was a little messed up, so I ordered a new one just to be safe. So once that comes in, I'll be able to drive it, but it moves under its own power. And let's see. Oh. It's cold, hasn't been started today, so. I've just got a little simple intake for now just to test it out, and got my IAC routed into there. Exhaust all done. So yeah, pretty cool swap, I'd say, and it went pretty well. So I'd recommend this to anyone, really. I think it's just as easy as like an LS swap or anything common. It's just a little bit different, and I think a lot cheaper because you can use your factory transmission without an adapter or anything. So hope you guys enjoyed watching. Hope you learned something. I sure did, just doing it. So hope that if you try and tackle this swap, it goes good. See you later.